Hi there folks, my name is NovaWing24 and welcome to another exciting episode of The Three Grumpy Simmers, and boy are we grumpy and tired this morning in this wonderful episode. Right, I do want to say first of all, welcome to my fellow Grumpy Simmers. First of all, thank you for joining us to Sergio from Helisimmer.com.
Hello everyone.
And welcome aboard to our infamous Tomcat part flying, purple jacket wearing Drew BelGeode.
I had to. All right, so let me just back up because the viewing audience is probably like, what the hell are they talking about now? So I've been playing Star Citizen. There's a new patch for Star Citizen 3.9, and I pretty much spent 2 hours in Star Citizen shopping for a purple jacket. And I found one. I found an awesome jacket. I had to fly like halfway across the Snotton system, but I got it. I got it.
See, if they release a Tomcat in space, I know damn well that'll become your ship forevermore. I know that. But anyway,
they kind of have something like that already, but it's no Tomcat. I mean, it does the swing wing thing, but it's not quite the same.
See, now I feel like I'm going to go off topic here, but there was that really terrible TV show back in, I think, the 80s, which basically they looked like Tomcats in space.
Robotech?
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah,
all right,
Macross.
Macross. Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right, there we go.
Which
now
is Robotech.
Now that riddle solved. So welcome, folks, to another episode. We are here with something that has been kind of interesting, and especially with the recent release of Prepared V5. This conversation has very much come to the fore in many of the plethora of forums and avenues for flight simmers to discuss their experiences and their desires about what they want to see in a sim. The topics of immersion and realism seem to be front and center about many of the discussions, and so we want to take an episode and take a few minutes to unpack these two concepts and how they appear to actually be, and whether or not what we're actually seeing is immersive and is it real. So I'm going to put the question out there first of all and say, what is it that we will do? Okay, I guess the first question is actually probably a better question is going to be, why do we strive for that immersion and realism? Why do we strive for that?
Sergio? You're the one who brought it up, so you're the first victim. Go ahead.
He was very much driving this topic, by the way, folks.
Why do we strive? Isn't it the whole concept of using a simulator to replicate reality?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing, right? Most of us, or well, the huge majority of those that use flight simulators use it to simulate reality, to simulate something that people want to do in real life and cannot do for some reason, or they might even do it because they are actual real pilots, but they try to simulate something that they will find on their lives, as on their professional lives as pilots, like for example flying under IFR rules. So it's a really, I think it's a really hard.
It's a tough
question.
one. It's an incredibly tough question.
Yeah. Look, it's a hard question. I think the answer is very simple. But I don't know if the guys, if those that are listening to the answer really get it. In a nutshell, it's because we want to simulate something that we cannot do in real life most of the time.
We want to experience something that we can't do that we can't necessarily do in real life. Yeah, I think that's a way to describe it. Yeah, okay. But where does that
at least as far as at least as far as the simulation aspect of it, not necessarily the immersion or realism. Because I can sit here all day and say, yeah, I'd love to be a Tomcat pilot. Obviously, I've missed my chance in real life in more ways than one. Um, but by the same token,
you'd have to
as
go
a
to Iran for that.
virtual Tomcat
Mm,
pilot, I'm
mm,
not going to be, doing a lot of the same crazy things that I do because that's not realistic. So we got to kind of separate the two. I mean, yeah, there's the immersion, there's the act of
mm.
being in the Tomcat cockpit and flipping all the switches and doing everything by the books and, do your mission and whatnot. And then there's the fun aspect or the game aspect. I know that argument comes up a lot whether or not this is a game or a simulator. Spoiler alert, it's both. When you're talking about the game aspect, you're talking about the unrealistic portion. That seems to be the common theme that I've seen on Facebook and the forums and whatnot. Is when people think that it's not a game, they're talking about the unrealistic aspects of it. So, for example, using my Tomcat example, I'm not going to try and land in the middle of a highway or something like that, or um, I'm not going to attack like my home ship or anything like that. It's not realistic. So I think that's probably a part of what we need to consider when we consider realism as it relates to the immersion factor. But it's just me.
And it's interesting that you are sort of seeking to with both those comments there that we're looking at separating the immersion and from the realism, but the taglines that seem to be used all the time from a variety of developers saying, increase your immersion by buying this add-on, or increase your realism by
Mm-hmm.
doing this. They seem to use them interchangeably, whereas the what you're suggesting there, Drew, is that we actually sort of separate those two terms. We separate the immersion experience from the immersion of the experience of being in a cockpit from the realism of how we actually do things. Um, and I think as I know, Sergio, one of the things that you very much are always discussing at length in your crusade to bring better helicopters experiences to all virtual pilots everywhere. That factor of the flight dynamics and how our sims utilize
Mm-hmm.
those is a big driver for you. Um, Tell us how that is has impacted, and also how what you've sort of struggled against with some of the other more non-rotary winged pilots and commentary in our simulation world.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that realism and immersion is any different in the rotor wing community than in the fixed wing community. Okay, and there are different levels of realism, there are different levels of immersion, and there are different limitations. Let's say, for example, and I think realism has much larger limitations, much bigger limitations than immersion. Drew was telling us about the fact that he likes to fly F-14s, and that's a very good example of how realism can be different for Drew, and for a guy flying an Airbus or a Boeing 737 or any tubeliner out there, right?
Hmm.
So I think realism is much more limited than immersion. Um, for example, perhaps my experience as an airliner pilot is more realistic than Drew's experience as an F-14 pilot, for the simple reason that G forces on an F-14 are much higher and have a tendency to have a larger amount of influence to your flying than on an airliner, right? So
Yep. And having spent time even greater than 6G, I can assure you that it very much does change how you fly. Yes.
Yeah, you have that experience, right? So I can have the same amount of realism in my 737 sim. I have all the buttons, all the gauges, a nice flight model, everything else.
Hmm.
Then Drew in his Have 14, but my realistic experience, but my experience is going to be more realistic in that aspect than Drew's, because although neither of us can feel the G's,
Hmm.
the thing is, G forces for Drew would make a much larger difference. Regarding immersion, in all honesty, it all depends on our imagination. It all depends on ourselves. Like,
Yep.
just guys, you guys remember when we started doing flight simulation, right? Do you remember the very first flight simulator you used? Do you remember how bad it looked compared to, do you explain P3D whatever? You remember that, right? It's just, it
I
wasn't even
Oh yeah.
3D.
so mine was a
Oh yeah.
wireframe 737.
Okay,
Vector graphics.
It was just a 2D panel. It was a Microsoft 2D panel only wireframe 737. Pretty sure I
okay.
crashed at the end of the runway.
Let me ask you a few questions. Did it have 3D clouds?
Nope.
Or clouds at all?
It didn't
Did
even have colors. It was monochrome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did it have smoke coming out of the tires when you landed? Oh wait, did it have external views at all?
No.
No, but here's no, yeah, but didn't you feel like you were inside a flight simulator? Didn't you
Yes.
feel like you were inside,
Mm-hmm.
up to a point, inside an aircraft? Didn't you feel immersed in the simulation? There was all
Yeah, you took it seriously. You took it
Yeah.
seriously
Yep.
because these little gauges that you're seeing on your screen
Yeah.
say, okay, you are here, you need to do this to continue flying.
Yep.
All of a sudden, it became real.
yeah.
The sweaty
Was it
palms or whatever,
realistic?
you don't need to see.
Yeah, was it realistic? Hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Were you immersed in it?
For me,
Yes.
it was.
But that actually, so both those comments from both of you gents is right there. Is that, was it real? Was it immersive? Was it realistic? Yes, it was for you at that time because that's what you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, Drew, sort of going off, the sweaty palms, because that it became real through our through our own experience and how we
It's that whole psychosomatic thing.
Exactly. And so the question becomes: are we relying too much on crutches to be able to support our experience?
Yes.
It,
Straight up. Yes.
that's
It's like way out of left field. Woo!
That's exactly what I feel. That's the thing. It's not, and I don't think it's. This is going to sound weird. It's not as the old timers that are doing that. I think the newer generations are going after crutches after crutches after crutches, and just to get that realism and immersion that they can have with everything they have right now, or everything they had last year, or everything they had 5 years ago, or everything we had 20 years ago.
Yep.
Right, and
So we're
I'm sorry,
spoiled, basically.
and
Yeah, I think
and I hate
Which is the
I
good
hate
thing.
phrasing it like that though. I hate phrasing it like that, but at the end of the day, it's kind of right. Like,
Yeah.
So
Listen,
like,
I'll be the first. I will be the first to admit I am very spoiled. Ever since I started using VR in 2017, and I swear, almost every day now I post the same thing. I can't fly without it. Like, literally, my immersion factor is so much now.
driven by that.
My
Yeah.
feelings of realism are so intense now that I have to have this thing on my head, which is like the biggest irony of all. In order for me to feel realistic, I need to immerse myself in a virtual realism. This is where we are. We're in that uncanny valley now.
But that's I guess it's sort of again it's how we build that experience and looking at things like that, and And I guess one of the things that is fascinating for me, and as I said, I have a fairly, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a bit of a unique perspective where I work in both the hobby space, the simulation gaming space, with you fine gentlemen and everybody else in the community, and I also work actually with professionals, actual pilots doing flight training and proficiencies using their sims. Um, and it's amazing to see what the differences of how they define realism and immersion and what is important to do that. And to your point, Sergio, and one of the things that I see, don't get me now, before I say this, folks, I want very clear here, I appreciate all of the amazing add-on developers that produce amazing content out there. You guys all rock, like you make amazing stuff. But it's interesting that the community seems to the gaming hobby gaming community, however you want to describe yourselves, seem to drive this desire for 4K textures, PBR textures, shaders driving this, that, and the other, and a stack of 300 bloody add-ons that's slowing your sim down. Anyway,
One for tire smoke.
and it's great that you got all that, guys. It's great that you got all that, and it looks great and everything else. But the real guys, they don't care about that. They really don't. Like literally the only thing they care about, and especially in and it depends on the type of trainer they're using. So if they're using a procedural sim, then they don't care about the flight dynamics. They care about the systems. Do the systems work? Are the systems accurate? And credit where credit's due, PMDG, as much as you annoy the hell out of me, I will acknowledge that the systems modeling that you guys do is second to none in this particular space, in our hobby space. And then you'll look at a, sort of fidelity sims, sort of the other sims, and they're more about the way the aircraft fly. Does it fly well? Does it fly accurately to the real thing? But they don't give a crap about graphics. They really don't, because at the end of the day, when you're going 400, when you're going 600 knots at 500 feet off the deck, you can't see squat. Just a reminder. So as I said, it's really, and as I said, I'm very fortunate I have an interesting perspective on this. So it's interesting to see, and to your point, Sergio, sort of going, we look at and we have this such a demand for different things and updates and add-ons and all the rest of it. But it's how much are we relying on other things, and are we prepared to put the effort in to simulate how we want to simulate. Now, I definitely don't want to say that anybody's way of simming is worse or less valid than anybody else's. But I guess it's maybe a point that we should all think about: what is our normal, what is good for us, may not necessarily be good for somebody else.
Yeah, that's the take we always have.
True.
That's the thing we always. That's the thing we always defend, and we have always defended from the start, which is everybody seems the way they want, and it's not right for you to try to push your way of simming into other people's floats. Yeah, we take some jabs here and there because sometimes, honestly, we see some things in the community that just it's just insanely funny and crazy. When people go through so much hassle and they get themselves at the throats of developers because they didn't have tire smoke that we always talk about. It's not important, guys. Yeah, when you're on the runway and you see other aircraft landing, you can see the smoke, but that's not what flying simulation is about. If you really need to have tire smoke, okay, that's okay, but it's not really what about flight simulation is all about, right? Flight simulation is about simulating flight. Yes, smoke is part of the flight, contrails is part of the flight, all those things are part of the flight, but we have virtual reality, folks. We have something that we only saw on sci-fi movies and read on sci-fi books. Um, uh, 10 years ago, you know, 10 years ago, it was pretty much impossible for us to have a VR set at home for a price that most of us could afford.
Hmm.
And it's not that expensive. We have spent a lot. We spend a lot more money on a graphics card than we do on a virtual reality set nowadays, right? You can get the
Confirmed.
Oculus,
Yep.
you can
Confirmed.
get
Yeah,
you can get
I'm
the
about
Rift
to be
for
up for a new graphics card. I looked at the prices and I almost died.
yeah. You can get a VR set for $300 nowadays, and you can have a nice graphics card for I don't know 600, 800, $1,000, 1,000 and
Yeah.
something dollars for the 2080. I
More
mean,
than the computer itself is worth.
yeah.
Don't
So
even get me started on that one.
It's
we
three
have
times the cost of the CPU to get a damn
yeah.
graphics card in
So look,
Australia.
we have flight simulators that can replicate flight models really well. They can replicate systems very well. They can replicate the whole world. You can fly everywhere. You can navigate everywhere. You have virtual reality. You have a way to get into the sim with other guys as well and do all kinds of things. And it kind of feels petty for me for people to get at developers' throats for not having tire smoke.
Yeah.
Does it break immersion for you?
If
Well,
there's no smoke, well, let me look out the side of the plane here as I'm
And
landing.
that's okay. So can I make a point on that? Okay,
Ain't no smoke out there.
so to that point, like that's a very valid point. Is that and as much as we appreciate and I'm going to sort of circle this back to the question you asked at the start, Sergio, where you asked, in that very early experience that we all had back in the wireframe flight simulator days, was there an external view? No, there wasn't. Now we have these wonderful external views, but yeah, people are asking, for 4K textures, tire smoke. So, question, folks, if you're flying a 777, hypothetically, let's imagine you were flying a real one, and actually, genuine question to any 777 pilots out there right now: can you actually see the tires smoke when you land from the flight deck? Because pretty sure you can't. Just throwing it out there. So,
I
but
can't
at
even
the same
see it
time,
from the
but
passenger seat.
but at the same time, now but using that same example of tire smoke is that, if you have I'm trying to think of a wheeled helicopter for a second here. A Lynx. So a Lynx, one of the later Lynxes that had the tricycle undercarriage. If you burn the brakes on the wheels, you will see the tire smoke. So, yes, that's where it perhaps is important. So it's not. We're not saying, folks, that it's not. It should never. We should never have tire smoke. In sims.
yeah, it's not that. Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're saying is that it's a time and a place, and what are you after in your experience? One of the perennial things that I think every flight simmer that has spent time in any forum at all has all seen the infamous rate my landing posts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
Yeah.
here's the
I
interesting thing
wake up
about
at
that.
night sweating thinking about it. I just shout and my wife gets all scared. I'm all sweaty because I'm just thinking, oh, what happened?
Oh,
I'm
Lord.
thinking of landing, of right my landing pose. It's just yeah.
So
Absolutely.
And I'm like, oh, you actually
That's good.
land on land.
so this guy
Fancy that.
this guy is pretty much the only one who's in his immersive and his realism would actually receive a rating for his landing, because he would get one from the LSO, from the plat camera, when he puts down his Tomcat or his Hornet onto the carrier deck.
Yep.
And having spent the better part of about 100 hours over the last few weeks doing a particular review for a new product, believe me, my carrier patterns have been getting through there and going through and getting the data. But anyway, moving on. That's a whole issue. I've been scarred by that add-on. I swear I've been scarred by that add-on. But
And you know what's funny on those rate my landing posts? Most of them are not even realistic.
so
There's
and,
that
and
word
that's
again.
so
Realism.
there's two things
Yeah,
about that. Is
because
that
they are greasing the landing, right? And the guys go all
Yeah.
Yep.
all. Yeah, I just landed with 0 FPM.
And it's
Yeah, you just screwed up, buddy.
yeah, no, like the aircraft actually needs to
0
hit.
FPM doesn't count if you're landing halfway down the runway. You need distance to stop. Unless you're in a BN Islander or some other STOL aircraft,
And,
that doesn't count.
and
And you
I'm
need
sorry,
tire
but
smoke.
everybody
Then you'll see
You need
tire
drag on
smoke.
the way.
and everybody.
You need drag on the runway, right, to slow the
Yeah,
aircraft down.
but and everybody who flies, you've. It doesn't matter whether you've flown in a MD-80, an ERJ-145, a 737, an A380. Believe me, when you land as a passenger, you know it. Because
Yeah.
it wasn't 0 feet per minute. That's not how you're supposed to land. It's supposed to actually give a firm hit to the ground for your systems. Anyway, sorry, I'm gonna. But it's just. I guess the point is, folks, is that when we're talking immersion and realism, it's a very fine line. And again, like we always say, as Sergio and Drew and myself have always said throughout pretty much every episode we do of this, how you want to sim is unique to you. So your way of simming, if you want that is, and if that is what immersion and realism means for you, then that you want the tire smoke, that you want the 4K external textures. That if that's what realism and immersion means for you, then that's great. But this, for the person whose immersion and realism wants to be that they want to be able to start an aircraft up by the book, a GA aircraft by the book, and never want to go anywhere near an airliner. They want to start a GA aircraft by the book and do circuits around their local airfield. If that's what they want for their immersion and their realism, and they want to be able to feel the aircraft fly and behave with the correct wind and thermal patterns that you experience with that by going over your local area, that is perfectly valid. As is someone who wants to do long line operations with a helicopter, that wants to fly, out on helicopter out to an oil rig and back. Like, there is none of these are any less valid. So if you say that, oh, your way of doing things is not realistic, it's not immersive enough, it's like, well, it might not be for your way of simming, but it is for them. And
Absolutely.
And how we sim and why we sim are very important things, and something that we really can't forget. That we all come to this hobby and this passion for various different reasons. And I'll be honest, is that the last thing I want to do when I jump on and sim, the limited amount of time I get to sim, the last thing I want to do is, I don't want to fly SIDS and stars. I really don't care. I really don't. I literally program those. So I'm like, okay, no. So you know what? I want to fly. I'm going to fly basically something fairly fast, fairly light, way lower than I should. But I want to feel the aircraft fly the way it would fly, and I want to experience that. But I don't want to replicate every procedure, because I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have a pilot's license, or be virtual or otherwise, after any of my flights. But anyway,
and don't consume yourself.
Yep.
Guys,
Guilty as charged.
don't consume yourselves going after something that you may never ever reach. Right? Just consider what you have. And I know, Drew, that you probably know of someone we know on one of the groups that we are on. We know this guy that's always consuming himself with problems and issues, and trying to find the most realistic settings and the most realistic this and that. And this guy gets, he bangs his head constantly against the wall, because he's constantly getting issues from all the freaking plugins and add-ons that he installs on the sim he uses. And then he constantly breaks. He's the guy that, he's the only guy I know that constantly breaks the sim. Okay, and we're talking
And
about
it's always a situation where he sees somebody else has something that will make the sim more realistic.
Yeah.
Ooh,
And
I've got to have that. And then not even a day later, Guys, I got this problem.
Look, me and Drew stopped making a drinking game out of it because our livers just packed and left.
I'm too young to die. I'm not even 50 yet.
Yeah,
Please.
we were all, we were all manly doing this drinking game, and then we went, oh no, Drew, I need to give up. And then my liver was like, oh, I
Mm-mm.
surrender.
Oh, and by the
Look,
way, since tire smoke is a hotbed or hot topic for this particular episode, just
just
so
like
you're
that.
aware, users of X-Plane 11, Laminar Research already did the update to include all particles. And yes, that does include tire smoke. So, if your aircraft, your add-on aircraft, does not have tire smoke on landing, you do not need to come to Facebook or any other forum and start complaining about why it's not realistic. What you need to do is you need to ask the developer of said add-on politely if they can add tire smoke to the thing because it's in there. Every single aircraft that has wheels has the capability to make tire smoke. It's already in there.
Hmm.
The developers just need to add it. It's not up to Laminar to do that because Laminar did not create those add-on aircraft. So,
Yeah.
there's your real answer as far as the tire smoke. Can we put the tire smoke to bed now?
We can. We can. Um,
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I
So,
think
guys, don't
yes.
consume yourself. That's just the takeaway I want. Don't consume yourself and spend all the time trying to find the more realistic add-ons because honestly, realism and immersion, a lot of it is inside our head. The example
It's
that I
very
gave earlier,
subjective. Yep.
yeah, it's
It's
versus.
it's
I
extremely
understand that you
subjective. Yeah.
need. Yeah, I understand that you need to have a certain degree of graphics or whatnot. I get it. I really get it. But don't consume yourself and your simming time going after this and having to fix your sim and having to go through a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
hassles that will give you a lot of grief. And I have learned this over time. I'm talking about my own experience, right? When 10 or 15 years ago, I spent a lot of time tweaking my sims, and I installed the sim and I tweaked and I went after all the CFG files for FSX and this and that. And then I installed Steve's DX10, whatever. And I spent so much time tweaking my sim, and all of a sudden something went south and I had to do it again. And I spent so many hours doing this, and then suddenly I realized I'm being an ass because instead of spending time actually simming and enjoying myself in the sim, I'm going through so much grief to make this sim more realistic when I am actually in my living room next to my computer in front of a computer screen
Yeah.
that nowadays, with a headset on my head, no, playing aircraft. I know you guys are going to hate this expression, but that's the thing. I am playing aircraft,
Hmm.
right? I'm using realistic flight dynamics as much as possible and systems, but this is not reality. This is the simulation of reality, and we need to let our brains trick ourselves into believing in what we are doing.
Yeah.
That's what we did 20 years ago with the 2D monochromatic
Yep. We didn't
graphics that
have a
we had.
choice. Yeah.
We didn't have a choice. So we had
Mm.
it's the same thing for example, Drew. I am with you when I say that it's very hard for me to go back from VR to a monitor. Right? I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's painful to do that. But if I had to, if my Vive goes boom someday and I have no way of getting a VR set, I have to go back to a monitor, and
Yep.
it will
You don't have
work.
a choice.
It,
I'm in the same boat.
it
If this thing
yeah.
goes kaput,
So
yeah, I don't have a
if
choice.
This is why I haven't
if
gone to VR yet because I fear from these two it's a one-way trip.
it is. So I just more than anything, I just want to leave this message. If I had to leave one message for you guys that are watching this episode, it would be this one: don't give yourself grief
Yep.
going after realism and immersion. 99% of it, it's already inside your brain. You just need to explore it.
Yes.
If you need you, if you need some aids to achieve it, be it VR, tire smoke, shaders, whatever, do it, but don't overdo it. Take your time to sim, not to tweak your sim. That's the message I would like to pass on to
And
everyone.
that's
Right.
a really sort of good way to sort of close it out, is folks, is that is don't let this pursuit of something which is quite frankly unobtainable, um, don't let it degrade your enjoyment of the hobby. Don't let it, because I've been exactly where Sergio has been as well. I would spend
Yep.
hours,
We've all been there.
weeks trying to
Hmm.
tweak this, tweak that, try shaders, whatever. Um, I do not have time for that. I really don't. I want to, and that was and something I learned. I probably shifted my mindset. I had that sort of come to the simulation gods moment, probably around the launch of Prepared V3, where I simply went, I'm tired of tweaking. I'm tired of all this junk. I just simply want to be able to jump in and sim. Um, and if something takes longer for me to load than I'm going to spend simming, then I'm not going to. It's coming out of my sim. Like, I don't care that it would make my lighting and my shaders look better, but if it's going to take 2 hours to load and I only have an hour to sim, it's out.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the thing, folks, and just please remember as well is that we are, and simulation very much is, as we said through this, and I sort of, again, circling back to the start of this, is that we are simulating reality. But by simulating reality, we are, it's an approximation of reality. It's close to, but it's not the same. And anyone, anyone and everyone that I have ever spoken with or any spent any time with that has spent time in any sim, whether it be a desktop sims that we all talk about and that we love on this program, whether it be an actual instructor's sim, an actual sort of manufacturer's sim, um, a flight school sim, air force, military, government sim. That experience is one thing, but what it is, it prepares you for the real thing. It cannot replace real time. Um, so you are approximating reality, and that's a big thing with learning and experiencing, is that you're taking part of approximating reality. You will never get, it's funny actually. I'm reminded now of Microsoft's slogan during when FSX was released: "As real as it gets." But legitimately at the time, and I dare say to this day, let's be honest here, because Prepared is nothing more than FSX on steroids. um, it is as real as it gets from a home user perspective. We can add things here and there, but the core functionality is as real as it gets. Use your imagination, use your mind, and please remember, folks, that we're talking about simulating, or getting close to approximating multi-crew aircraft, high-speed military jets, multi-crew helicopters. Like, this isn't something that, for the most part, is meant to be done by one user. We're talking, you spend hundreds of hours in ground school, in flight school, conversion type training, um, before being able to get certified, then going through, sitting for the tube liner pilots, you sit in the right hand seat for 1,000 hours before you get to move to the left hand seat. Um, and remember, you're simulating a multi-crew aircraft that the flight crew sit in their seats for the entire
For the
for
entire
the
flight.
entire 8 or 14
Hmm.
hours of the flight. They don't get
Yep.
to program their FMC, hit go, and then go and sleep for 8 hours and come back, and it's paused waiting for you at top of descent. Um, so just your immersion and realism is different for everyone. But please be mindful of that. And if it's going to negatively impact your sim experience, then it's actually detracting from your experience. Let your mind, use your imagination. Your mind is so capable.
That plus, do not let it negatively impact your life. You might hear a lot about having a work-life balance. That's been a really popular theme over the last 10 years once we realize that people are just getting way too stressed out. And especially with all of us still on this pandemic lockdown, as it were, where, most of us are working from home and so on and so forth. We're rediscovering the fine art of work-life balance. Well, we can translate that to the sim as well. You can't allow yourself to be so consumed from the sim. Believe it or not, I actually take breaks from flight simming. There'll be like 2 week periods or 3 week periods where I won't even get in the virtual cockpit at all. Just to kind of pull myself back so I don't get caught up in that situation where, okay, I need that little extra bit of realism, that extra bit of immersion, whatnot. Pull yourself out of it. Remember, at the end of the day, it is a virtual reality. Regardless of whether or not you've got an actual virtual reality headset, you're still looking at a virtual world on your monitor. You gotta pull it back. You gotta learn to balance it out. That, I think, will help in the long run as far as achieving that immersion once you head back in there, because then you can suspend your disbelief.
And I think that finally, yeah, that the suspension of disbelief is a really important thing. Your brain is such a hugely powerful tool. Let it explore itself. Let it explore and let it imagination. And also, just as a side note, can we get over this stigma attached to the term role play, please? Can we get over that? Like, can we get over this, please? Because that's another thing that really frustrates me is people who insist that, oh, it's only realistic if I am talking to ATC all the time and they have to use the exact same terminology and they have to talk. I'm like, oh, okay. So the recent Cross the Pond event, which is VATSIM's, I think, biggest event of the calendar of the year. You've got
Excuse me, captains. Excuse me, captains. Are you saying I should not address other people on Facebook groups?
No, we've been through this before. I'm a commander, thank you.
So, it's like, guys.
In before the first guy comments, hey, this guy's got a stolen valor issue. Please.
Okay, so all right. So I know we all have issues with the default ATC in whatever you sim platform, X-Plane, Prepared, FSX, whatever. We all have issues with the default ATC. Can we please understand that when you go onto a service, an online community such as VATSIM, IVAO, Pilot Edge not so much because that's a paying one, but yeah, so VATSIM and IVAO, you're talking about volunteers. People, like, you are all... Sorry, guys, just so you know, you're all role-playing, okay? If you're flying your aircraft, then you're role-playing as a pilot. You're actually role-playing as usually 2 people, 2 or 3 people, because there's you, you're taking the role of yourself as the captain, the first officer, and possibly a flight engineer. And then you're then working with other people who are role-playing as the various classes of air traffic control. Can we just realize that we're all doing this to have fun? So please, when I hear tales and when I heard some of the audio from that of the abuse that some of the controllers were getting, yeah, not acceptable, guys. If that's where you're at, this is what I say to my sons.
Pull it back.
This is what I say to my sons. I say, if you're behaving like that, it's time for you to get off and walk away from it and not come back to Sydney for a while. Because I think you need to reassess what's going on. So getting back to that whole work life, or in this case sim life balance, yeah, just we're here to have fun and experience things in how we want to sim. And at the end of the day, we aren't professional pilots. Mic drop. Okay. I think
on that note,
I might run for the hills because I feel the hate flowing through the comments already.
Well, guys, thank you very much for watching the last episode of the Three Guys Gamers. I hope you.
All right. Well, but yes, as you guys alluded to, so I do want to say that
I'm gonna be like that one kid in the meme. I'm not a part of this. I don't know these guys, no.
All right, so I do want to say thank you very much for watching our latest episode and possibly our last one. Thank you very much to Sergio from Helisimmer.com.
Okay.
Blame him for this topic, by the way.
Yeah, this is all his fault.
And I do want to say thank you very much for Commander BelGeode of as he goes back to his Tomcat. Don't forget, folks, to head over and check over both of these guys' channels and for some of the great content that's coming over from them. And finally, thanks very much from me. Don't forget to perhaps maybe just throw my channel a like and a subscribe. And if you do enjoy these little bits of community reflection and commentary, please consider supporting the work done by the three Grumpy Simmers and help keep us on air by heading over to patreon.com/Novawing24 to give us a support there. But please also give us a like and a subscribe and hit that bell button for me. Alright folks, thanks very much for joining us. Take care, safe skies to all. Please simulate how you enjoy simulating, and please remember to be kind to each other and keep washing your hands. And take care, safe skies to all. We'll see you next time. Bye
Ciao.
for now.